So let me try to find where we stopped. See, here we go.
Hello, sir.
How are you doing?
Baruch Hashem, bless the Lord. I am doing well, relatively speaking. I'm doing well.
That's good. Happy to hear that.
Still, as the days go by, still a bittersweet sort of situation with these captives.
Mm-hmm.
So glad to have them home. Nervous what this means for the continuation of the war. So we'll have to see. Of course, I have some clients that are in. So that's nice. Shopping is a little different just because a lot of the stores and spaces are a lot quieter, less people.
Mm-hmm.
But it's nice to see that people are still excited, and seemingly there's going to be a very big boom of aliyah, which means ascending, which means moving towards Israel, which is in Jewish terms it's called ascending because we're coming back to Israel. So we'll see if that comes to fruition, if really a lot of people are going to be moving, whether it's because of fear of anti-Semitism or it's because feeling that they want to be with their people. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. How about you? How's your week been going? How's work going?
It's been going good. We had Thanksgiving weekend, so a long weekend, so that was nice.
What did you do?
Just spent time with my wife here, two friends, and then hiked. So just took advantage of mostly just resting and relaxing.
That's nice. That's fun when that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's this comedian that says, what does he say? He's like, people have that saying, he slept like a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And it says well, I guess whoever made up that saying has never met like a baby before in his life. He's like, it should be, I slept like a person, like I slept like an adult that doesn't have a baby.
Right.
Right. So that's really more what it's like. My 2.5 years ago, right before we had a little longer, 3.5 years ago, roughly, before we had our daughter, we just got to this place that both my sons were old enough to just do their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And finally it was Shabbat afternoon and my wife and I took a nap. And I was like, I haven't taken a nap in forever.
Luxury.
And then we decided to take out another mortgage in the shape of a baby and have another baby. So, and since then she's been getting up. I mean, they've been getting up around 5:50. Yeah. So one day I think there's another half a year to a year of that. And then napping time will come again. So,
yeah.
But thank God they're healthy and they're happy. That's what matters. How old is son, daughter? I'm sorry if I forgot.
No, I don't have
none. How did I think you had one child?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The seder. Okay, where were we? This is where we ended up last week, or Gimel, I think.
So Gimel is where we ended up. Yeah. So that was the last one we did.
Remind myself.
And sorry, Dalit is where we. I think.
No, we didn't read Dalit yet.
No, we didn't. Yeah.
Okay. We ended it with section 3.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we spoke about that we need to be not scorning someone, and also realizing that not only is it specifically over here, it's not really burning someone or bullying someone. It's more identifying. Well, I guess that is in some way considered bullying, but it's identifying someone's truth, so to speak, or someone's essence, and then denying that. And in a certain sense, you're denying that person's existence, and it's almost akin to murder. So it's horrible. And then we had a little breakdown about for there's no man who doesn't have his hour, and no thing that doesn't have its place. we did a breakdown of like how we understand that like we have to both appreciate, and this relates to the earlier things we were talking about of learning from every person, that every person has this moment to shine, and we have to be able to identify and see that, and more than that, sort of akin to, in a certain way, a superposition, right? Like between like a wave particle. So it's when you're observing it, right? It's actually comes into fruition. So here too, like for a man to have its hour in a certain sense, it requires the other people to allow for the space and room for that person to have its hour and us to observe properly. But that happens only if we're actually looking for that and recognizing that every person has its potential and everything has its place. And if we align those things, obviously we could find ourselves seeing a tremendous amount of opportunity, right? If we identify the potential in the thing or in the place or in the person, we could find out that we have many, many options in front of us.
Yeah. And I think so. Two things. The one thing that we spoke about the maflig, discount anything, but also the separation or the being a contrarian.
Right.
Or that is something that you can fall into that kind of like pattern of everything you need to point out or offer an alternative view or a positional view, and sometimes that actually doesn't. There are ways in which that doesn't value or increase the value of the conversation. And actually, another thing that comes to that is that I didn't think about, but al tiye baz lekol adam. I wonder if this is connected. But baz is also the word in Hebrew for falcon. So I don't know if baz, there is some connection.
Here it's coming from biza, like
Biza, okay.
also like
right,
so, or bizayon.
We'll steal the carcasses or something like that, maybe.
I hear you. Okay, I'll accept the
some connection.
If we're okay using Kabbalistic terms and completely flipping the term on its head, like using that's all fine. You mentioned the maflig, right? And here it's a and do not discount anything. What they mentioned over here. However, maflig, like we said, is to divide, is to separate.
Yeah.
But people have a tendency. I don't know if people have a tendency yet, but we've seen also in this little corner an element of steel manning, as we say, right? So you want to give the best interpretation you can for the opposition's idea, and really explain it to yourself and to the person who's claiming that, so he really feels that you understand him completely, which is a very good tool and muscle to practice on. However, sometimes that could lead you into a line of being like constantly being like the devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Right. And like, you don't want to be someone that is just like, well, I could say this and I could keep on dividing and splitting up the argument, because ultimately, while one may be very skilled to do in doing so, it can end up being detrimental in a certain also way, which that also relates to the postmodernism, right? Where I'm getting rid of the concept of narratives, and I'm then changing the concept of words. So very quickly you start becoming very divisive, where like even the word divisive itself, what does that mean? And who am I? And like, why are we even here? So like, you could start deconstructing very, very quickly.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. Section 4. Rabbi Levitas, ish Yavne Omer, meod have shafel ruach, שתקוות אנוש רימה. רבי יוחנן בן בורקה אומר, כל המחלל שם שמיים, בסתר, נפרעים ממנו בגלוי. אחד שוגג, ואחד מזיד בחילול השם. Rabbi Levitas of Yavne would say, be very, very humble, for the hope of mortal man is worms. Rabbi Yochanan, the son of Burka, would say, whoever desecrates the divine name covertly is punished in public. Regarding the desecration of the name, the malicious and the merely negligent are one and the same. All right. So, Rabbi Levitas, just as far as like context, you could see in his name Levi. Right. So this is a Levite. However, and we've had this like with Antigonos Ishtucho. You could see over here the Greek, I'm blanking on the word, but
influence
the Greek influence on the names over here. And you could even see that these rabbis are adapting this sort of language. So we could see over here that this is, we're at the turn, quote unquote, at the turn of the century over here, where there's some changes going on.
Yeah.
The fact that they also call him an Ish Yavne, because we spoke about many times that Yavne became like the main club after the destruction of the temple. Mm-hmm. He was known to being Yavne regardless. Like even before it became the hip place, he was born in Yavne. And I mean, I don't know if he was born in Yavne, but he lived in Yavne and he was raised in Yavne. This quote specifically, which is just interesting, I think it's this quote. It's not word for word, but it's this idea. It's not originally Rabbi Levitas. Rather, this is a quote that's written in one of the Sfarim Chitzoniim, the books, they're called like the exterior books, the books that never made it into the canon, but were close to making it into the biblical canon. And it's called Ben Sira. And Ben Sira talks about sort of like Ecclesiastes, like these beautiful ideas. And it almost made it in. There's a discussion about it in the Talmud. While it didn't make it in, there are many sages that quote Ben Sira, and I would say like here's a perfect example of where it's being like tweaked a little and integrated fully into like our corpus already at that point. But generally speaking, this is, I think you could find this idea like 300 years ago or so beforehand. So it's just like a little tidbit.
Right. And what you're referring to is the
something like that. I can't remember the exact wording, but it's something in that nature. Okay. So we see over here, and like it says in English, be very, very humble. So one needs to be humble. We understand that. There's an interpretation that we talk about shafel ruach, not only humble, but you also have to see yourself as less than, as in it's more than just being like, don't give me any praise. It's more about saying like, I'm not necessarily even worthy of that praise that you're giving me, and not just sort of hide away, but really see yourself as someone that's not worthy of that praise, which is interesting because it's a question, and rabbis, the sages have discussed this in the past, whether like a Talmid Chacham, a scholar, needs to completely negate ego and pride, or is there room for some sort of ego, which is like a healthy amount of ego, which allows you to feel confident about yourself. So, I mean, I think what we know today, which is just for the human psychology, it's important to feel confident. And as we raise our kids and things like that, it's important to put in positive words and positive reinforcement. So you want someone to grow and feel confident with himself. However, A, you want to avoid like overconfidence, and B, you want to avoid really someone feeling that like, it's all about him. He's the main story. So the focus is really, again, not just being humble. And we could see that in the very, very, right? Like we have this double word over here that they're stressing that it's not just like the classic version of being humble. And we could also see this in how Maimonides interprets, not specifically this, but generally speaking, Maimonides believes in the middle of the road. Derech HaZahav, right? So you want to create a balance. You don't want to be extreme in any way. However, the Rambam does talk about being humble, how in that kind of case, you do want to take the extreme position, as in you want to err on the side of being more extreme than taking the middle of the road in this case. So here too, you could say that this is where we see the me'od me'od, the very, very, to stress that. You could also see that when in the verse talking about the land, the aretz tova me'od me'od, the land was very, very good. So that I believe that's what it's stressing. Then we have another interesting, specifically in English, how they write over here. So in Hebrew it says shetikvat enosh rima, and they translated it to for the hope of mortal man is worms. So I don't think the word, while some people interpret it as hope, generally speaking, it's not necessarily man is hoping for worms, rather man's destiny is worms. Like the end of their line is worms. And we mentioned this in a previous chapter also about that you ultimately end up with worms, but here it's to really stress the fact that if at any point you did think your ego, if at any point your ego was getting the better of you, you have to remember that at the end of the day, you're going to be 6 feet under, and worms are going to be eating off your body. So you're left alone. You're buried with none of your belongings. And we discussed this last time about how Sheldon Adelson, like this big philanthropist, was died, passed away during COVID, and you see like this eerie picture of just like him and his wife, and that's it, and then no one could come. And at the end of the day, like that's how you go into the ground. However, I see they mention over here hope, and we have the word tikva. The way the sages interpreted that is one has hope to eventually, it's sort of a little morbid, but if one wants to get closer to God, at some point at the end of the day, once he dies, that's really how he gets to like the next level, basically. While yes, you want to do everything you can in this world to fix the world and better yourself and connect and work on your relationship that way. But then there's the world to come, and there's your spirit, your spiritual connection with God. And so when the word hope comes in, like there's a part of you that's hoping for death at the end of the day. Not to be morbid, but when I speak to my grandfather, may he live and be well, who's entering his 101st year. So when I speak to him, I ask, like, are you excited? I know you're sad, like all the kids and things like that, but like you could see your kids did well and your grandchildren did well and your great-grandchildren are doing their thing. Are you excited for phase 2? And he is, he's not like, he doesn't like say it like, woohoo, but he says, I'm interested. I'm curious. He's like, I'm not impatient, but I am excited. Yeah. And it's, I guess at that age, you could get to that point where you want to use those words. But to me, it's sort of beautiful. I joked around with my cousin that like at Saba's funeral, I'm like, there's going to be tears, but I hope people are smiling because like he won, you know what I mean? Like he got to the end of the line, and thank God it's hard for us to think about, let's say, death at, let's say, a very old age is in a certain way almost like a birthday again, because like you're entering phase 2 in the good state, in the proper state of mind, so to speak.
Yeah. It's a difficult thought, but especially especially as you reach, especially you reach 100, you're at the spot where, and you are able to look back at the things that you have left behind, and then I guess it gives you the opportunity to frame the next step in your life in that way. So
I had my brother over with his children, and we went to go visit my grandfather. And my nephew, once he was done with high school, he decided to join a yeshiva, a Torah learning program, an intense Torah learning program. And while I did one that's called Hesder, which is both, it's a 5-year program I ended up doing for 6 years, which is studying and army, he wanted to just do the studying option. And he wasn't necessarily sure about doing the army. And he was, let's say, moving further right. After October 7th, he has decided that he wants to join the army. However, his institution told him that they were very sad that he was leaving, and they were showing him all like these verses, how like, no, it's important to, while yes, it's important that the soldiers are doing their part, we need to be studying, we need to be learning. And they also told him that like, if he goes, he can't come back to that school afterwards. And he was presenting this to my grandfather, and my grandfather was saying, he's like, I have dreams that are older than like, like your whole, so he was giving him his opinion and what he thought and why he was giving him strength and telling that he agrees with his position, and explaining to him why that ultimately there's there's a difference between studying Torah and embodying Torah, like we were just talking about all the time about, is it more about the study or is it more about the actions? And he was saying how like it really is about the actions at the end of the day. And he went into a whole conversation about that. But it's nice to have, that perspective at that old age. All right. Onwards. By the way, I just noticed that there's some comments over here. Ascend by moving to Israel. And okay, Ben Sirach. Okay, it's Ben Sirach. And Andrew, ascend by moving to Israel. Yes, so when you move to Israel, you're ascending. You're moving higher up. You're moving. Think about Jacob's dream in a certain sense, right? We are moving closer, further in and further up. Okay, so Rabbi Yochanan ben Berka. I actually don't know much about him. I know he was also he was a Yavna dude. And we mentioned in the past, Rabbi Ishmael was his son, but I don't really know much about him. I guess we could look up afterwards, but I can't. There's nothing that rings a bell of like a famous story about Rabbi Yochanan ben Berka.
But they're connected, Levitas and Yochanan.
Both because they're both Yavna dudes.
See, shared the same cubicle.
They're sharing the same cubicle, exactly. And he tells us, "Kol mechalel shem shamayim beseter, nifra'in mimeno begalui." And in English, it's whoever desecrates the divine name covertly is punished in public. So, off the bat, this reminds me very much of just like the world of canceling. When everyone thinks they could be tweeting and they forgot about the tweet 10 years ago, or some picture that they put, and here they're saying even if you're trying to hide it, ultimately you're punished publicly. Like the secrets come out, you can't hide these things forever. And I think it's generally like a very good lesson where I always tell people also that when you have a secret and you just tell that one friend and he tells you that he's not going to tell anyone, he also has that one friend that he's going to tell and make him promise that he won't tell anyone. And that friend has that one friend that they're going to tell. So these things always come out. And today we live in an age of a tremendous amount of scrutiny. So I think it's definitely important to take that into consideration as well. However, the terminology is a little weird over here because desecrating God's name sort of built into the name is sort of a public action. Because if I'm in private, how is that desecration happening? In a certain sense, where is this desecration happening? So the sages obviously discuss this and look at this and say that even things that you're doing privately, you're still doing things that if they were done publicly, they would be considered a desecration. Right. So it doesn't matter that no one saw you, but you have to imagine what if someone saw you, so it's still considered a desecration. There are other interpretations that say that the desecration over here is that the acts you're doing privately are acts that sort of built in are desecrating acts. So like a classic one would be like idol worship. Right. So it doesn't matter whether it's happening publicly or not. There's a desecration happening over there of God, or using God's name in vain. So those would be actions which are desecrating God, but they could still happen in private.
So is Shabbat also an example of that?
Well, Chilul Shabbat.
Yeah.
Sure.
So isn't there a distinction, though, in terms of if you do Chilul Shabbat in private versus flaunting it and do it in public? And that is one of the conditions for Mitah, Right.
So Chilul Shabbat is the desecration of Shabbat, is not the desecration of God necessarily. While you could say they're both the same, like one leads to the other, you could say one is specifically about the Shabbat. And also there you could also say that what if there's a case where I don't know that I'm desecrating the Shabbat, but it still happened? Right. So I had no intent of desecrating God's name, so to speak. And I had no intent of desecrating the Shabbat. That just happened by accident, which is why the verse over here stresses again that the malicious and the merely negligent are one and the same. So this is, quite curious that we're saying that
Right.
like it doesn't matter whether your intent was, it doesn't matter what your intent was, you are still considered that you desecrated God's name. And here too, it's a question of the intentions sort of don't matter if the stakes are so high. So you could say about the Shabbat that, like, while it's horrible that you do that, but there's a system in play, as in if you did it but you didn't know, it's a little different, or you did it and you knew but only one person saw you or two people saw you, or is at night. So there's different levels of how this comes into play. But desecrating God's name, it's sort of like a non-starter.
Okay, so just to help me out here,
Sure.
desecrating the Shabbat is a step below desecrating the name of God.
Yes, however,
in a very binary way.
However, you could desecrate the Shabbat, which would lead to desecration of God's name as well.
Mm-hmm.
But so there are some that even interpret this line that the malicious or merely the negligent are one and the same, and that refers to basically any sin is considered a desecration. It doesn't matter whether it's intent or not. Now, that doesn't mean the ramification is going to be the same, right? You might not get lashed. There could be different outcomes based on where you were with regards to how the law is dealing with you. But with regards to your relationship with God, a desecration happened. And that goes back to what we said earlier, which you can look at both of them together, which is any sort of sin is a desecration, and definitely one that is one which is definitely categorized as a desecration. It doesn't matter whether your intent was what your intent was. It's just the stakes are too high for you to be not knowledgeable enough or not aware enough that your actions are causing this to happen. And so it definitely puts a lot of the onus is on you to be very, very aware of these actions. And that's why, generally speaking, if you're growing up in like a religious household, you're being told all the time, don't go out doing this because it's going to be a desecration. Don't be doing this because it's going to be a desecration. You are being looked at as a representative of God, so to speak. And any of those actions that you're going to do, like if they're going to see a religious Orthodox Jew lying on the street drunk, they're going to think, well, this is what the religion produces. If they're going to see you like yelling and screaming in the middle of the streets, then this is what the religion produces.
Yeah.
So clearly the Mishnah is really stressing the fact that you have to be extremely, extremely careful about this.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess, if you have to be extremely careful, just maybe offer like a final, another pushback, or just the same point. But if you have to be so careful about it, is it really helpful if you just said that there is an opinion that says that everything is a desecration of God?
Yeah, I would say there is an opinion that interprets the verse that way, that it's all a desecration. He's not telling you what the ramification of that is. He's saying, like, he's taking an extreme mindset that all sin is a desecration. And even there, you could say it's a desecration of your relationship. It's like I'm saying. So then we could start categorizing what is a desecration of. Aside from being God, it's damaging you, it's damaging the relationship. But what I lean to as far as the interpretation, it's more that the classic examples of desecration of God, for example, like idol worship, or like some sort of public offense, which is calling out God. So there too, you could say that, listen, I didn't know. I wasn't sure that me, acting this way or saying this is going to be a desecration. For example, it could be that on one of the live streams, I said something stupid, or I behaved in a way that people are looking, and Andrew comes and says, like, wow, this is what like a religious Jew says that. Like, I would never think someone that is a religious Jew would say such a thing. It doesn't matter if I was joking, if he misunderstands me. Like, I should have been more careful with my speech, as we've mentioned many times. Be careful with your speech, be careful with your intention, all those things, because you never know who's watching, you never know who's seeing this. And again, when the stakes are so high, you have to take those things into account.
Yeah. And in terms of punished in public, is that a description of what should happen or what is happening when that happens?
So good question. Nifra'im mimenu begalui doesn't mean, just in English, is punished in public. That doesn't mean that the authorities are punishing him in public. It means that ultimately you will get punished publicly. So it could be that it's like a direct cause, right? So you didn't want anyone to know about that you, I don't know, embezzled money, and then everyone found out on national television that you embezzled money. That would be like a direct correlation. Or it could just say that desecration was A, and publicly you are, people find out that you've been, I don't know, cheating on your wife or whatever it is, and it has nothing to do with that desecration. It's just, arguably, you could even say that punishment itself could be a desecration, right? So you could argue that if God is involved in punishing you, ideally it would happen in a way that's happening publicly, but that's not a desecration again to God.
Right.
So ideally it wouldn't be that you are found out by doing another transgression. Rather, it would be that you end up finding yourself being humbled or embarrassed due to some other things that you do, or punished could even be you lose your fortune or something worse. Obviously, it doesn't give us the details of what God's calculations are. And it's generally, even when we say that you get removed from the world or that your lifespan is ended or you get punished, the Torah and the Mishnah generally leaves it quite vague, because we've already said, like, don't be doing these good commandments to get the reward, and don't be making those calculations. So yes, there is a consequence, but even that, like, you should just know that there's a consequence. You wouldn't have to getting into the detail of like what God specifically is going to do to you, because we ourselves don't know what that is. And I would say this is, in a certain way, also a warning, which is, like I said, that if you think you could hide it, ultimately light is going to shine on it. It's going to be found out. So it's there also to warn you that if people today are erasing their history log, it's here to tell you that, like, there's no erasing your history. Eventually, we're going to find it.
Yeah.
All right. Next Mishnah.
Let's do it.
These are short and cute. Okay. Rabbi Ishmael Omer, halomed Torah al menat lelamed, מספיקים בידו ללמוד וללמד. והלומד על מנת לעשות, מספיקים בידו ללמוד וללמד, לשמור ולעשות. רבי צדוק אומר, אל תעשה עטרה להתגדל בהם, ולא קרדום לחפור בהם. וכך היה הלל אומר, ודאשתמש בתגה חלף.
Wait, I think we might have. Where are you reading from?
From yours.
From mine? Wait.
Let's keep on scrolling down. There you go.
Okay.
It's just a long.
Yeah.
Got it?
Yeah.
הלמדת כל הנהנה מדברי תורה נוטל חייו מן העולם. רב יוסי אומר, no, wait, scroll down. Did you just scroll down too much? Maybe I went down too far. Yeah, sorry. I kept on reading. Okay, let's just read it in English.
Yeah, I think we might. You might have. Did you read Rabbi Tzadok? Al tifosh metzibur. Yeah. Okay, I might have. Okay, maybe I lapsed and lost consciousness for a second. Okay. Rabbi Ishmael, the son of Rav Yossi, would say, one who learns Torah in order to teach is given the opportunity to learn and teach. One who learns in order to do is given the opportunity to learn, teach, observe, and do. Rabbi Tzadok would say, do not spare yourself from the community. Do not act as a counselor at law when serving as a judge. Do not make the Torah a crown to magnify yourself with, or a spade with which to dig. So would Hillel say, one who makes a personal use of the crown of Torah shall perish. Hence, one who benefits himself from the words of Torah removes his life from this world. They're never down to just say, like, and God's not happy with that. It's always like very dramatic.
It's always dramatic. I wonder if, like, while they're writing it, there's someone there looking, being like, Rav Ishmael, again, can we just have like a little less drama? Okay, so halomed Torah al menat lelamed, maspikin biado lilmod ulelamed. So off the bat, you could see over here God saying, God or the heavens are intervening to help you do so, right? So you're going to be empowered, whether it manifests into you teaching very well, many students, the right channels, the right subscribers. The idea is that if you want to do good deeds, you are being assisted to do so. We're good?
Yeah.
Now, here too, we have to see that there's a person that someone that is learning, that's actually doing proper learning, ultimately will end up teaching, right? So the process of learning properly brings you into the space where you have to repeat yourself, go over the material, confirm that you're understanding this correctly, and then you end up finding yourself in a place where you yourself are the teacher.
Yeah, so that's kind of like al-minat, one who learns Torah in order to teach.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But exactly. So that's what happens when you're doing so properly. Yeah. And if you're just learning from yourself, ultimately, then your understanding is like limited, because all you have is your own psychological structure that you're dealing with. So if it's all ultimately inside your head, you're only going to get so far. Right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think I've learned or kind of like learned about when you speak about in the Hasidic terms, in terms of the garments of the soul and the speech being something that you can think of, that's especially something that is for the other, because you don't necessarily speak so that you understand. You speak so that others, so that you can communicate something, but that actually allows you to elaborate and kind of further the thought about something. So it's kind of very much, I also see that connected, and I think it's mentioned there in terms of like chokhmah bina v'dat, in terms of like Chabad, being able to really capture an insight, and maybe you need to sit with it and really understand it. But then when you start communicating to others is where you can expand the concept. And then obviously beyond that, which is actually what they're talking about now, al minat lasot. I guess maybe
on the next, right. So just to like, we started with like halomed Torah, right? Right. So that we discussed, but you're limited. But al minat lamed, because even if we said like you've reached the peak of your own learning as an autodidact, so to speak, within your own psychological framework and vantage point, however, to teach requires you to move on to like a higher level and a more complete level, because you are bringing in a broader range of perspectives, and it forces you sort of to explain to that person from his point of view as well. Right. So you are, and this goes all the way back to Mikol Melamdai Iskalti, as we just said, like I'm learning from all the people I interact with, recognizing that I could learn from every person. So all these are part of one big puzzle, ultimately, that we need to be reading together.
Yeah.
And like you just said, v'halomed al menat la'asot, right? But one who studies to learn, maspikin be'ado lilmod v'lelamed, lishmor ve'la'asot. Which it's also interesting over here that last time we just said the one that teaches, one that's learning Torah to teach, gets to learn and teach.
Yeah.
And in theory, you should have said one that is learning to do gets to learn and do. But here he gets to teach, learn, and do. Like it's like there's like an additional level that you get to this, basically.
Right. Yeah, and it's also interesting that it's lishmo velasot. And I know, I mean, isn't it in the morning prayer is lishmo velasot velekayem?
Correct.
So yes, there's multiple levels. For some reason, it's distinct. You can say it's all do, lishmo lasot lekayem. So observe, do, and fulfill. I don't know what lekayem is. Yeah.
Well, that would be the difference, because there is lishmor, right? So it's keeping it alive, keeping that conversation going, keeping it relevant, being present with that commandment. Lasot, attempt in actually doing it right now. Ulekayem, and be successful in fulfilling it as well.
Interesting. Yeah.
So, you're getting like extra points over here, brownie points over here, because because you want to do all these things, you're getting like sort of extra push from God, so to speak. Like we said earlier, God's going to assist you. So here, when you want to be doing more, you're getting even more assistance, so to speak.
Yeah.
And there's also a case over here that he's someone that is doing it not just to learn and teach, because you could argue that there's there is a sense over there which is for his own purpose, right? Like, I want to be teaching, I want to be like gaining some sort of respect over here. When we have this sequence of to do, it's only for the sake of God. As in, yes, it's nice that while I'm learning, I'm gaining this knowledge, but I'm not doing it to gain knowledge. I'm doing it solely for the purpose of accomplishing and embodying this mitzvah that I'm commanded to do so. It's a perk that I'm getting knowledge doing so. And, I'm sure you've seen people before that like love studying for the sake of studying. And there's people that love studying because they want to like, pick up those skills and then be able to act in the world, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's also a sense where here again, like we're talking about practical matters in the end of the day, like I was saying with my nephew. And you could see here again, the rabbis are ultimately focusing on that just during experiment, like only when you experiment on the ground, right? When you leave the laboratory, the laboratory, and you're leaving the study hall, when the rubber hits the road, that's when you could really, really start, integrating your learning and getting like and like requiring like a better like understanding of what it is you need to be doing and how it actually manifests on the ground. And there's only so much you can gain with abstract knowledge inside the study hall. Right. Yeah. We need to see what happens on the ground. And I think, again, it's important to stress, even though we mentioned this like many, many times, at the end of the day, like we said, the first Rashi, the focus is the practical matters, right? What can I learn from this? What can I do with this? So yes, it's nice that if I'm sitting down and learning, I reach these high heights, I could go into mystical lands. But at the end of the day, I need to bring that down, like we were talking about in this week's portion, when Jacob has his dream, and we're talking about potentially two different ladders. While I'm ascending, ultimately, I need to come back down. I can't just stay up in the mountain. I have to be able to bring down this knowledge, and I have to embody it on the ground itself.
Right. Yeah, which is the same as saying is like to hold a specific perspective and to act from within it, which I guess is what Rabbi Tzadok is going to talk about.
Right. So Rabbi Tzadok comes and tells us, what does he tell us? Do not separate yourself from the community. Do not act as a counselor at law when serving as a judge. Do not make the Torah a crown to magnify yourself with, or a spade with which to dig. So would Hillel say, one who makes a personal use of the crown of Torah shall perish. Hence, one who benefits himself from the words of Torah removes his life from the world. So Rabbi Tzadok, there's a few Rabbi Tzadok, but because of the sequence we're talking about over here, we were talking about Ben Azai and we spoke about Ben Zoma. So this is most probably like one of the students of Rabbi Akiva. Also, this is right after the destruction, so to speak. I think he was also quite a pious man. There's a story that he started like fasting like before the destruction of the temple, even hoping that he could prevent it, basically trying to be like as pious as he can during that period.
Is he the one with the fruit, the dried? Who's the?
He's the one that gets very, very sick.
Yeah,
he's needed to and this is like when there's like a split between the two different factions. He has to be taken out of the city. There's a deal that they do. That's how we also have the smicha, the ordination of the rabbis continues. So this is that Rabbi Tzadok.
Right. Okay.
And he tells us over here, Al tifrosh min hatzibur ve'al tasaseh atzmecha korech hadinin. So it's two different extremes. It's saying don't remove yourself from the community, from the congregation. Now we've spoken about this a few different times of we don't want you to be alone and don't find yourself disconnected from anyone. Yeah. This is less talking about, let's say, in general communal affairs, and more talking about like the flip side we have over here, which is don't act as a counselor, which is sort of don't act if while you're in this study mode, right, we were saying you're studying and you're doing, don't pick your hands up and say like, listen, like, I'm just a teacher. That's all I know. I'm like, sort of once we leave the study hall and how this manifests practically, don't come to me about those questions. I can't help you with that. And even if I have an answer, I'm really talking to you like in theoretical land. And like, don't remove yourself from the community in such a way, which is not only did you just teach for your own, teach and learn for your own sake, but it's an extreme version of that where like you don't want to have anything to do with once it leaves the study hall. On the flip side, it says, don't turn yourself into this lawyer, so to speak, basically, when serving as a judge, right? So someone is now coming to ask you, you are teaching and you are doing, and someone wants to know what you think about this. This relates in a certain way what we just said earlier about don't try to be divisive or fleek. Don't start now coming in from like this completely technical place and start taking apart the whole argument when we're looking for answers. We're looking for practical moves on the ground. We need to know how to do that. And it's sort of a flip. The person that is sort of moving away from the community, he's keeping it in theoretical land, in lawyer land. It could be this, it could be that. I could be both ways. I could be devil's advocate. I can't give you an actual answer, and that's why I'm removing myself from the community. On the flip side, if I'm giving you too much details, I won't be able to act, right? You just gave me 7 different versions and 7 different scenarios of like what could be and what can't be, and now I need you to judge. I need you to discern. I need you to make a judgment so I could actually move forward right now.
Okay, this is a little bit confusing because the way it's written, also, I mean, I think you used a lawyer. The first is so I want to clarify to myself and maybe for others, but do not separate yourself from the community. So that is one extreme, and then you're saying that do not act as a counselor at law
when serving as a judge.
When serving as a judge, right? So,
right, like you could have a counselor, and that's totally fine. But if you're always in counselor mode, right? I don't need just counsel. I need to know like how to act. And this is sort of moving from, let's say, learning and teaching to teaching and doing.
Right.
So we left it in theoretical land. And even if you're a great teacher, like, okay, but now what? And now we have to move in from teaching to actually doing, which is someone that knows how to make those decisions and actually act in the world.
So how is it different to separate from yourself from the community and to act as a counselor when serving as a judge?
I'm sorry, again, what do you mean?
How is it different than from how we're explaining it? Like to separate yourself from the community?
Well, I'm separating myself from the community when, okay, so we're coming into, this class right now, okay? You and I are talking. So you and I are talking about different opinions, different options. And at some point you came to me earlier and you said, right, Chezi, but like, what's the difference if it's happening without intent and with intent, right? You just gave me like 7 different options over here that they spoke about. And then I told you, well, the way I actually interpret it personally as Chezi is XYZ, right? So, but if I didn't answer that, I would have left the community, so to speak, because like, I'm not giving you an answer. I'm just giving you like, here's information and there's nothing you can do with it. So like, I can't use that I can't use that. And because I can't use that, I'm seeing you as someone that's left the community. You're no longer engaging with me in a proper form. However, when I understand what you're saying. You're saying it seems like it's doubling up, right? Don't separate yourself from the community because you're acting like a lawyer, and don't act as a counselor. So I think they're just stressing the same point and focusing and saying what the way you should be acting is like a judge, basically, in certain cases. And this is the context again of the learning that we've been talking about.
Right. Okay. So this is an emphasis on do not separate yourself from the community and do not act as a counselor when serving as a judge. So again, it's having a certain perspective of holding on to something so that you can fulfill it.
You could even argue that like the first version is like someone that sort of says like, I don't want to be involved. And the second person says like, I'll be involved up until a certain point. Right. So like one would be like, I'm not even answering you. 2 would be when I need an answer, you're not giving me an answer. You're just giving me like multiple options. And that's not what we need right now. I need you to be a judge.
Right. Yeah.
Now, again, this also has to do with the next line that we're going to read, Al ta'aseh matara litgadel b'hem, and don't make it a crown. So we're talking about this individual, right? Which is like, hey, Joey, I've seen, and this relates to like, don't be studying Torah. And we were talking about how we need to respect the others and be humble. So here it's clearly people are coming to me right now. So I could decide to put my hand up and walk away from the community. I can decide to, yes, engage, but never give you an answer, right? I know there's some tremendous amount of Torah, but I'm never giving you an answer. Mm-hmm. And then it's also mentioning, since you're the person that people are coming to and asking, also check yourself. Don't be looking at this crown. Don't exploit the words of the Torah. It's learning, it's teaching to elevate like your status, basically, in front of the other people in front of you. And in a certain sense, this is sort of why they came to you. And you're looking at this situation over here where there's this person that clearly knows a lot, that could clearly act as a judge, but he's not doing so. Either he's not answering, or he's just showing me that he knows all the options. And then we're stressing, because you're acting this way, what else are you using your Torah for? You're not engaging as a community, like in the community. You're not giving me answers. So is the only thing you're doing over here is using this as a crown to just like boast yourself and be like, look at me, I'm the guy that people comes to. Mm-hmm. So it's stressing again how like we don't want to be using it that way. Velo kardom lechatech ba, right? And we don't want to have a spade to dig with. So here too, we're using like, you don't want to be using the Torah as like a tool, like a personal tool that you could use right now, like for like social purposes or economic purposes. Basically, like you're using it as, here they use a concept of a spade, but the idea is like, you know, you could dig in and create yourself like an artificial system, but that's not really focusing on the Torah values. It's more about like the benefits that I could get from doing that, basically. Mm-hmm. And like, just again, with that concept of the spade, it also alludes to the fact that, like, you know, we call the Torah the tree of life, right? So the spade is, you know, dealing with the ground and the foundations and what you need. So the attitude is like, don't look at Torah as just the tool itself. Rather, ultimately, you need to use that tool to dig the hole, to plant the seed, right? And to have a tree grow from it. And this would be, in a certain sense, also alluding back to the judgment, right? If I'm just acting like the lawyer, then I'm just the shovel. I'm shoveling up, I'm making a lot of holes, but what am I doing with these holes? You're just using it to make tools, but I need you now to actually plant a tree, roots to grow, and I need to know like what's actually going to come out from this itself. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, what this line is famous for Torah study, which is known, how many rabbis interpreted this is, don't receive any payment for teaching Torah. And the Rambam is famous about this, about, basically saying that, you know, anyone that's engaging in Torah, like study and like not work, and relying on the charity is desecrating God and desecrating the Torah, and is he uses like very harsh words about you're making the world darker. Mm-hmm. There's a joke that people think Maimonides books were burnt because of the Guide to the Perplexed, mm-hmm. and his theological view. However, there's a joke that really in the more ultra-Orthodox communities, the reason that his books were censored was because his comments about the study of Torah. Right? No one wanted to hear that he was like bashing people for just studying Torah all day. And we spoke about this in the past, famously, definitely for this period of time, many of the sages all had other jobs. Even ones that were poor would never ask for money from the community.
Yeah.
Right. So this is, we use that example of either he was like a blacksmith or like a carpenter, and they came to get an answer from him, from one of the rabbis, and he said, like, are you gonna replace me doing like this mm-hmm. metal work right now? And if the answer is no, come to me when I'm done with my work, because I have to work, and only then I could actually engage with you in Torah study.
Interesting.
This also, of course, relates to the conversation my nephew was having, and also politically in Israel, because we have this issue with, there's people that are studying Torah, which we obviously value, but it's a hindrance on the system that we have, right, with regards to welfare and how they get paid. And while obviously it is extremely important to teach the Torah and study the Torah, so much so that even this verse about that you can't get paid to study the Torah was eventually lifted, because just like we weren't allowed to write the Torah down and there was a need to do so by Judah the Prince, same thing happened again. We don't want to be teaching for money, but at some point we got to a place where there aren't teachers and they're not teaching because they're not getting paid. So we need to do this.
Yeah.
And then the same thing happened again with regards to women studying, right? We said like women can't study, or they could only study a very limited amount of Torah. And then we decided like, due to modernity and the changes that we've dealt with, we had with us as a society, at some point we have to decide that this needs to happen. They need to be studying. And I've argued, and others have argued, that with regards to teaching Torah to Gentiles, here too, this was prohibited, but now is the time where this also has to happen as well, because we've reached a point, either when we're back at our land, or that like we're safe enough to be teaching these stuff, or that because they want to be learning this stuff, but we're at this place where it's the time to do this.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we have Hillel comes in with a quote, which is stressing what we just said. He'll say, one who makes personal use of the crown of Torah shall perish. Hence, one who benefits himself from the words of Torah removes his life from the world. So here too, we have a sense where Hillel also is just stressing this, and we've seen this throughout the whole few sections we read, where it's a repeat of the same thing, how important it is to, and we call the Torah the crown, right? The Ketel Torah. So it's not that you can't have the crown of Torah, rather it's you turn it into your own personal crown.
Right, yeah. I guess I listened to Breidowitz, a Q&A with Breidowitz, and he was answering a question about, somebody had a question about, there's a company in Israel, and they have a slogan, and the slogan is from the Torah, and it says, it's got a play of words on Torah, and they asked them if this is halachically right. And
wait, I don't understand the scenario. What's happening?
The scenario is that there's an Israeli company, so obviously they're communicating in Hebrew, and one of their slogans, they have an advertising campaign, and they're using a slogan that is kind of like a pun or something from the Torah, a verse from the Torah, and they're using that to kind of connect that to their product and to make money, obviously. So the question that the student gave the rabbi was, is this halachically allowed? And Rabbi Breidowitz, just to sum it up, said basically, if this is just for the sake of them making money, it wouldn't be allowed. But if, for example, the purpose of the organization is to it's to increase the study of Torah, it's for kiruv, or it's something about kosher, making things kosher, or anything like that, then that would be allowed because their purpose aligns with the Torah. So that was just an interesting kind of like specific.
Right. So I think you would then see, and then there would be levels of that, right? So let's say you come and say, like, guess what? You could use a verse from the Bible as a pun, because like your intentions are good. The question is, like, are you putting profanity in that pun? Are you like then like how would you play with that pun, basically? So there would be like levels of, because then you're getting close to doing potentially like a desecration, right? Because like if it's misunderstood, and that would be like, you would also have to be very careful with your words. There'd be a lot of focus groups that have to happen before you unleash this. All right, next Mishnah.
Yeah, and I guess the only small thing also that I think I've heard, that when it says about the crown of Torah, it can also refer possibly to the smallest unit in the Torah, which is the crown of a letter. So even using a letter of the Torah or the crown of a letter of the Torah for your own benefit can lead you to the things that Hillel tells you.
So that's a good. It's good that you're specifying this, and this would be like juxtaposed to, let's say, Rabbi Akiva interpreting every single shape of the letter, right? So it's like if there's an interpretation of every letter, even that I could sort of manipulate and use that as a improper tool.
Yeah.
Rabbi Yossi Omer, כל המכבד את התורה גופו מכובד על הבריות, וכל המחלל את התורה גופו מחולל על הבריות. Rabbi Yossi would say, whoever honors the Torah is himself honored by the people. Whoever degrades the Torah is himself degraded by the people. So this is again like another version of what we said about someone that desecrates God name privately. It happens publicly. We'll see again like there's this sort of tit for tat sort of conversation going on. Rabbi Yossi is actually an interesting person. He lived up in Tzipori. I don't know if you've ever been there in Israel. Tzipori?
Where is that?
It's up north in the Galilee. There's a famous little, like, if you go on a school trip up north, many times they stop there because they have this little rest stop that's built inside this old train cart, basically. From the time of Yossi. No, I'm just saying. They have this old train cart that people use. So it's just, I was wondering if you knew the place. The tradition says he is the descendant of the Rechabites. Is that how it's called in English? Bnei Rachav, not Rachav, the alleged wife of Joshua from the story of Jericho. But Rechabites are the descendants of Jethro.
Okay.
And there is a discussion. Actually, it's funny because Jacob spoke about this recently with Rabbi Malot. But whether or not like they were considered Noahides or they were actual converts. But either way, he was known as a descendant of them. He's clearly Jewish. So either they were all Jewish and he's a Jewish descendant, or they were Noahides and he converted. Or somewhere up the lot, somewhere in his family tree, someone converted. But just on the Rechabites specifically, in Jeremiah, they're known to they're very strict on the commandments and how they behave, and they are used as an example of proper behavior. When Jeremiah is ripping into the Israelites, he says, like, "Why are you not acting more like these Noahites over here?" Or he saw Elijah every day. So he tells us, "Kol ha'mechabed et haTorah." So right, so one that is continuously. Some of the interpretations are someone that is respecting the Torah. So there's like a surface level, plain level of just like being respectful. But generally speaking, we're talking about someone that like diligently day and night, v'agita bo yomam v'layla, learning and observing. And really, really engaging in it fully and not exploiting it, like we said earlier, like a tool, right? You're just respecting the Torah as is. There is a more direct interpretation, which is like respecting the Torah itself as in like a Torah scroll and making sure it's placed in the proper garments and in the proper ark, basically. And that, there's a whole halachic ramification to that. Like when you take it out, you stand up, you kiss the Sefer Torah, you put it away. You have to act to the actual physical Torah itself in a very respectful manner. And on the same line, there's also an interpretation which also has a halachic ramification, which is respecting the Torah means not speaking in prayer time while the Torah is being read. So my family has and others have a tradition, which is, generally speaking, most people sit. They don't talk, but they sit during the Torah reading portion. However, when the 10 Commandments comes, everyone stands up because it's the 10 Commandments and those words are holy. And my family and others hold that all the words of the Torah are holy. So if you're going to stand up for the 10 Commandments, you really should be standing out throughout the whole time it's being read. So hence, much to my son's chagrin, when the Torah is being read and everyone is sitting, we are standing. I mean, there's a few other people that stand, but we stand during it's happening. So we're trying to respect the Torah as much as we can. Some say the Torah is, and we've mentioned this in the past, the Torah is also seen as those who embody the Torah values, right? So the sages, you have to show them respect, right? So because they are the representatives of the Torah, you have to, show them respect. And this also relates to what we were saying about don't get paid to study Torah. The way that worked is because from a halachic point of view, if one of the rabbis was sold apples, if he came to the market, the way it would work is no one from the market could sell apples until the rabbi finished selling his apples. And only then would you allow to sell your apples. So the idea is the community is always making sure that he gets preference. And that's why he's also being taken care of. While it's its own fruits of his labor, so to speak, there's like a hierarchy, so to speak. And that's why that would also protect someone from becoming poor as well, because he gets like not the right of first refusal, but he gets like a put, so to speak. He gets to act first. Also, the fact that you get respected is quite obvious because you're respecting the Torah, but the attitude is you are respecting the creation of the Torah, so you as a creation that is being spoken about in the Torah also get respect, right? So if you're respecting the Torah, you're really respecting yourself, and if you're showing yourself self-respect, that's a healthy balance and mindset to have.
Yeah, and I mean, just from the face of it, what's interesting here is the choice of words here, because in the first sentence, maybe you say "Gufo mechabed el habriot," himself honor from the people. Okay, it sounds maybe a little odd, but then "Kol hamechalel gufo mechulal el yedei habriot," that gives me at least a very physical connotation, like a connotation. So is he trying to hit it in that is that so gufo mechulal is like it sounds like being tortured or something like that.
So
because it's a body, goof is
right.
A body.
So we'll start with first gufo mechubad el habriot, right? So you're being respected, so some people interpret, like I just said, with the apples. Right. Your physical well-being is being protected because we're giving you respect. We're paying for your studies. We're supporting you financially, and that also has a physical ramification as well. So like you're being respected, and literally your physical body is being respected as well. Yeah. Now, what you were mentioning is that right? So why are we saying again, like the body gets desecrated? And there's a sense of here from chalul, as in hollow also, which is someone that is hollowing out the Torah. His body himself is being hollowed out. And this has to do with hollowing out, which is your Torah lacks depth. So you yourself also lack depth, and people are not going to give you the time of day to explore the deeper aspects of yourself, and you yourself are not going to be able to do that, and that's why you can't respect you. So it's like it's a double-edged sword. You're not putting in the proper time in understanding the Torah to its proper depth. Yeah. So therefore, no one is seeing you that way either. They're just reading you on face value. And if there's only seeing you in face value, you ultimately would end up seeing yourself in the same way as well. And then you are going to lack your exploring the deeper aspects of yourself.
Interesting. That actually sounds familiar to when I was reading C.S. Lewis, and he talks about the abolition of man. I got that recommendation from PVK about, and the abolition of man. One of the points there is about really the mechanization of, or like how you can take of deconstruction. And especially when it comes to like psychology, if you kind of like mechanize or you create the human into a system that you can manipulate, because you're trying, maybe you start with manipulating because you want to understand how it works, but then the value of the human body and the human soul, when it comes to psychology, then degrades the whole concept itself, and then it becomes something not only that you can evaluate, but that you can manipulate very easily. So it has some interesting points about that specifically.
Well, I think this also relates to respecting the Torah. It's a sense of going back to hollowing it out. If and also hamechabed also comes from kaved, from like weighty. So one who respects because he realizes the gravitas, the weightiness of the situation and the people in front of him and the things he's learning. That is someone that also realizes if these things have weight and a depth to them, I myself also have a depth and weight to me. However, if I look at these things at face value, I also see myself this way and be treated.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So that's
I think we'll end here.
Yeah. Sounds good.
I'm going to actually jump on a stream now with Gilad, with Shleif, to talk about Israel stuff. You're welcome to join if you'd like to. All are welcome to join.